Book of Heaven, Volume 27, Part 4. November 6, 1929. Jesus, Center of the Creation. The Word, outpouring of the soul, the value of it. Who is the bearer of the works of God? My abandonment in the Fiat continues, and it seems to me that all of creation, and the many works it encloses, are my dear sisters, but so bound to me that we are inseparable, because one is the will that animates us, and everything that Jesus did while on earth forms my life, and so I feel as though needed with Jesus and with all his acts. So I felt myself surrounded by everything, and in the center of all things I could see my sweet Jesus, taciturn, though in the midst of so many works everything was silence, and he had no one to whom to say a word. The most beautiful works were mute for him. Then, drawing me to himself, he told me, "My daughter, I am the center of all creation, but isolated center. Everything is around me. Everything depends on me. But since created things do not have reason, they do not keep me company. They give me glory. They honor me, but they do not break my loneliness. The heavens do not speak. The sun is mute. The sea tumults with its waves. It murmurs tacitly, but does not speak. It is the word that breaks loneliness. Two beings who in words exchange their thoughts, the affections, and what they want to do. This is the most beautiful joy, the purest feast, the sweetest company. Their secrets, manifested in words, form the dearest harmony. And if these two beings blend in their sentiments, in the affections, and one sees his will in the other, this is the most pleasant thing that can exist, because one feels his life in the other. Great gift is the word. It is the outpouring of the soul, the outpouring of love. It is the door of communication. It is the exchange of joys and of sorrows. The word is the crown of the works. In fact, who formed and crowned the work of creation? The word of our Fiat. As it spoke, the portents of our works came out, one more beautiful than the other. The word formed the most beautiful crown for the work of redemption. Oh, had I not spoken, the gospel would not exist, and the church would have nothing to teach to the peoples. The great gift of the word has more value than the whole entire world. Now, daughter of my divine volition, do you want to know who breaks my loneliness in the midst of so many works of mine? One who lives in my divine will. She comes into the middle of this center, and she speaks to me. She speaks to me about my works. She tells me that she loves me for each created thing. She opens her heart to me and speaks to me of her intimate secrets. She speaks to me of my divine Fiat and of her sorrow, for she does not see it raining. And my heart, in hearing her, feels in her its own love and sorrow. It feels as though portrayed again. And as she speaks, my divine heart swells with love, with joy, and unable to contain it, I open my mouth and I speak, and speak at length. I open my heart and I pour my inmost secrets into her heart. I speak to her about my divine will as the only purpose of all our works. And while I speak, I feel true company, but a speaking company, not mute. A company that understands me, that makes me happy, and into which I can pour myself. Has everything I have manifested to you about my divine will perhaps not been outpourings of love? Transfusion of life that we did, one into the other, and that while I would speak to you, serve to entertain us, and to form the sweetest and most pleasant company? A soul that lives in my divine will is everything for me. She makes up for the muteness of my works for me. She speaks to me for everything. She makes me happy, and I do not feel lonely. And having someone to whom to give the great gift of my word, I am no longer left as the mute Jesus, who has no one to whom to say a word. And if I want to speak, if my fiat is not there, I will not be understood. But the Jesus who speaks and has his company. Then my poor and little mind kept wandering within the divine fiat, and my lovable Jesus added, "My daughter, my divine will simplifies the creature. It empties her so much of everything that does not belong to it, that nothing else is left of the human being but a complex of simplicity. Simple the gaze, the word, the manners, the steps. The mark of the divine simplicity can be seen in her as though in a mirror. Therefore, when my divine will reigns on earth, pretense, lie, which can be called origin of every evil, will no longer exist, while simplicity, as origin of every true good, will be the true characteristic that will point out that here reigns the divine will. Now you must know that our love for one who lets herself be dominated by our divine fiat is so great that everything we want the creature to do is first formed in God himself, and then it passes into her. And since her will and ours are one, she keeps it as her own act, and she repeats it to us as many times as we want. So one who lives in our divine volition is the bearer of our works, the continuous copier and repeater. With the eye of light that she possesses, given to her by it, she fixes upon her Creator to see what he is doing, in order to absorb it into herself, to say to him, "I want to do nothing else but what your adorable majesty does." And we feel twice as happy, not because we are not happy without the creature, since in us happiness is our nature, but because we see the creature happy, who by virtue of our will comes closer to our likeness, loves with our love, and glorifies us with our own works. We feel that the creative power of our fiat reproduces us and forms our life and our works in the creature. November 10th, 1929. Only the little ones enter to live in the divine will. Example of the little boy. Difference between the creation of the universe and that of man. The divine fiat absorbs me completely within its light, and in order to give me its prime act of life, this light palpitates in my heart and makes me feel the heartbeat of its light, the heartbeat of its sanctity, of its beauty and creative power. And I feel my little soul like a sponge, all soaked in these divine heartbeats, and unable to contain it because of my littleness, and feeling itself burned by the scorching rays of the sun of the divine fiat. In spasm, it keeps repeating, "Fiat, Fiat, have pity on my littleness. I feel I cannot contain your light. I am too little. So you yourself form the void. Make me larger, so I can contain more light, that I may not remain suffocated by this light, which it is not given to me to be able to embrace completely, so as to enclose it in my little soul." But while I was thinking of this, my sweet Jesus told me, "My little daughter, courage. It is true that you are too little, but you must know that, in my divine fiat, only the little ones enter to live in its light. And at every act that these little ones do in my divine will, they suffocate their own, giving a sweet death to the human will, because in mine there is no room nor place to let it operate. The human volition has no reason nor right. It loses its value before a will, reason and right which are divine. It happens between the divine will and the human, as it could happen to a little boy, to whom, on his own, it seems he is able to say and capable of doing something. But if he is placed near someone who possesses all sciences and is skillful in the arts, the poor little one loses his value, remains mute, and is incapable of doing anything. And he remains fascinated and enchanted by the lovely speaking and fine operating of the scientist. My daughter, this is what happens. The little one without the great one feels he is something. But before the great one, he feels more little than he is. More so before the height and immensity of my divine will. Now, you must know that as many times as the soul operates in my divine will, she empties herself of her own, and forms as many doors to let mine enter. It happens as to a house, which could possess a sun inside. The more doors it has, the more rays come out through each door. Or to a piece of metal which had holes, and were placed in front of the sun. The more holes it has, the more each little hole is filled with light and possesses the rays of light. Such is the soul. The more acts she does in my divine will, the more entrances she gives it, in such a way as to become all irradiated by the light of my divine fiat. After this, I was continuing my round in the creation, to follow the acts of the supreme fiat done in it. And my sweet Jesus added, "My daughter, there is great difference between the creation of the whole universe and the creation of man. In the first, there was our creative and preserving act. And after everything was ordered and harmonized, we added nothing else that was new. On the other hand, in the creation of man, there was not only the creative and preserving act, but the active act added to it, and of an activity ever new. And this because man was created in our image and likeness. And since the Supreme Being is a new, continued act, man too was to possess the new act of his Creator, which might resemble him in some way. Therefore, our active act of continuous novelty remained inside and outside of him. And by virtue of this, our active act, man can be and is always new in his thoughts, new in his words, new in his works. How many new things do not come out of mankind? And if man does not give his new act as continued, but at intervals, it is because he does not let himself be dominated by my divine will. How beautiful was the creation of man! There was our creative, preserving, and active act. We infused in him, as life, our divine will in his soul, and we created our love as blood of his soul. This is why we love him so much, because he is not only our work, like all the rest of creation, but he possesses part of our life in a real way. We feel in him the life of our love. How not to love him? Who does not love one's own things? And if one did not love them, he would go against nature. Therefore, our love toward man gives of the incredible. But the reason is clear. We love him because he came out of us. He is our child, and a birth from our very selves. And if man does not exchange his love with ours, if he does not surrender his will to us, to keep ours, he is more than barbarous and cruel against his Creator and against himself, because not recognizing his Creator and not loving him, he forms a maze of miseries, of weaknesses, inside and outside of himself, and he loses his true happiness. And by rejecting our divine will, he puts himself at a distance from his Creator. He destroys the principle of his creation, consuming the blood of our love in his soul to let the poison of his human will flow in it. Therefore, until our will is recognized and forms its kingdom in the midst of creatures, man will always be a disordered being, and without the likeness of the one who created him. November 14th, 1929. How the rights of creation are just and holy. Example of the Son, and how one who lives in the divine will is the true Son. I am always in my dear inheritance of the divine Fiat. The deeper I remain in it, the more I feel like loving it. The more I move within it, the more it unveils itself, the more it makes itself known, and says to me, "Live always in your precious inheritance, which was given to you with so much love. It is yours. It will always be yours, inseparable from you. Nor will I ever permit that my little daughter not feel the heartbeat of my light, the breath of my balsamic air, the life of my divine will. But while my little mind was wandering within the divine volition, my lovable Jesus, coming out from within that same light of the divine fiat, told me, "My daughter, because the sun possesses the strength of the unity of its light, given to it by its Creator, its light is not subject to separating, and not even to dispersing one little drop of its light. Therefore, by virtue of this one strength of light which the sun possesses, there is nothing it touches and invests to which it does not give its precious effects. The sun seems to play with the earth. It gives its kiss of light to each creature, to each plant. It embraces everything with its heat. It seems to blow and communicate colors, sweetness, flavors. And while it abounds so much in giving its effects, it is also jealous in not giving up to anyone even just one drop of the so much light it possesses. And why this? Because it wants to maintain the rights of its creation and disperse nothing of what God gave it. Oh, if the sun dispersed its light, it would end up happening, little by little, that it would no longer be sun. The first rights of how all things were created, including man, are sacred, are holy, and just. And with justice, all should stick to the first act, as they were created. Only man was unable to maintain for himself the great honor of the way he was created by God. But this cost him so much, and therefore all evils swooped down upon him. Now, my daughter, one who lives in my divine will possesses the rights of her creation, and therefore more than sun, she lives in the unity of her Creator. She is the reproducer of the effects of the divine unity. In this unity, she gathers everything, embraces everyone, warms everyone, and with the breath of the divine unity, she produces in the hearts of creatures all the effects which are present in the kingdom of grace. But while more than sun, she plays in touching everything, with her touches she gives sanctity, virtue, love, divine sweetness. She would want to enclose everyone in the unity of her Creator. But while she wants to give everything, jealous, she preserves for herself the rights of her creation. That is, the will of her Creator as her first act and the origin of her creation. And she says to all, "I cannot descend from within the divine fiat, nor do I want to lose even one drop of it. I would lose my rights, which I do not want to do. Rather, come up, all of you, and one will be the will of all. In this way we will live common life. But for as long as you remain at the low level of the human will, like sun, I will give you the effects of the divine will. However, its life will be always mine, praying and waiting for all of you in the will of our Creator. One who lives in my will is the true sun, which is such that, apparently, one sees nothing but light and feels nothing but heat. But how many goods are there not inside that light and heat? How many effects? The life and the goods of the earth are enclosed inside that light and heat. In the same way, with one who lives in my divine fiat, Apparently, one sees a creature, but inside there is a divine will that sustains everything. Heaven and earth does not want to keep inactive the one who possesses such a great good. November 20th, 1929. How peace is the fragrance, the air, the breath of Jesus. How the works of God are all ordered. How he does minor things first, and then greater things. Example of creation and redemption. I was concerned about this blessed printing of the divine will, and at any cost I would have wanted to prevent some other things that regarded me, and many other things that my beloved Jesus told me, from being printed. I feel a nail driven inside my soul, which embitters me deep into the marrow of my bones. So I was thinking to myself, blessed Jesus could have spoken of his adorable will first, and then of all the rest. In this way he would have spared me the sorrow that pierces me so much. But while I was pouring out my bitternesses, my always lovable Jesus, all goodness, clasped me in his arms and told me, "My daughter, courage, do not lose peace. Peace is my fragrance, my air. It is the effect that my breath produces. So in the soul in whom there is no peace, I do not feel I am in my royal palace. I feel uncomfortable. My very divine will, which is peace by nature, finds itself like the sun when clouds advance against the light and prevent the sun from shining in its fullness over the earth. It can be said that when the soul is not all peace, whatever the circumstances might be, it is like a rainy day for her, and the sun of my will feels as though hindered from communicating to her its life, its heat, its light. And therefore calm yourself, and do not form for me clouds in your soul. They hurt me, and I cannot say, I am in this creature with perennial peace, with my joys, and with my light of my celestial fatherland. Now, daughter of my volition, you must know that I am order, and therefore all of my works are ordered. Look at how ordered is creation. The purpose of creation was man, yet I did not create man as first. Had I done it, I would not have been orderly. Where to put this man? Where to place him? Without the sun that would illuminate him, without the pavilion of the heavens that would function as room for him, without plants that would nourish him, everything was disorder, and my Fiat reordered and created everything. And after it formed the most beautiful dwelling, it created man. Does the order of your Jesus not show in this? Now, for you also, I was to maintain order, and even though our primary purpose was to make known to you our divine will, that it might reign in you like king in his royal palace, and as it would give you its divine lessons, you might be the herald in making it known to others. Yet, like in creation, it was necessary to prepare the heaven of your soul, studying it with stars, through the many sayings of the beautiful virtues which I manifested to you. I had to descend to the low level of your human will in order to empty it, purify it, embellish it, and reorder it in everything. It can be said that those were many sorts of creations that I was doing in you. I was to make the ancient, disordered earth of your human will disappear in order to call back the order of the divine Fiat in the depth of your interior, which, making the ancient earth of your whole being disappear, would make heavens, suns, seas of surprising truths rise again with its creative strength. And you know how all this was matured through the cross, through segregating you from everything, making you live on earth as if it were not earth for you, but heaven, keeping you always absorbed either with me or in the Son of my divine Fiat. Therefore, everything I have done in you has been nothing other than the order which was needed in order to give you the great gift of my divine will, as it was given to the first man at the beginning of his creation. And this is why there were so many preparations, because they were to serve that man who was to possess the great gift of our will as his beloved inheritance, symbol of the great preparations made in your soul. Therefore, adore my dispositions, and thank me by being faithful to me. Another example is my redemption, and how it is necessary to do secondary works in order to obtain the intent of forming the primary works of a goal we have set. My descent upon earth, taking on human flesh, was precisely this: to lift up humanity again, and give to my divine will the rights to reign in this humanity, because by reigning in my humanity, the rights of both sides, human and divine, were placed in force again. Yet it can be said that I said nothing about it, or just a few words, making it understood that I had come into the world only to do the will of the Celestial Father, so as to make its great importance be comprehended. And in another circumstance I said, "Those who do the will of my Father are my mother, my sisters, and belong to me." As for the rest, I kept silent, while the purpose was precisely this, of constituting the kingdom of my divine will in the midst of creatures. In fact, it was right that I not only was to place creatures in safety, but I also was to place my divine will in safety, by giving back to it its rights over all flesh, as I had given it over mine. Otherwise, there would have been a disorder in the work of redemption. How could I come to place creatures in safety, and let our divine rights, those of our Fiat, go to rack and ruin? This could not be. But even though the first purpose was to balance all the accounts of my divine will, as celestial doctor, I complied with giving medicines, remedies. I spoke about forgiveness, about detachment. I instituted sacraments. I suffered atrocious pains, even unto death. It can be said that this was the new creation I prepared, so that creatures might receive my divine will as king in the midst of his people, in order to let it reign. So I have done with you. First I prepared you. I spoke to you about crosses, about virtues, about love, to dispose you to listen to the lessons of my Fiat, so that by knowing it, you would love it, and feeling within yourself the great good of its life, you would want to give its life to all, making it known. loved, and letting it rain. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 27, Part 4. Fiat.